Welcome, everybody. We're so excited for you to be here. This is going to be a very exciting and impactful symposium. My name is Dr. Megan McGarry. I'm a pediatric pulmonologist from Seattle Children's Hospital. And today we are going to be discussing about the hope of a cure for CF, because I think that is all for why everybody is here and why the CF Foundation was created. And we need to talk about the many barriers to that very elusive hope right now. And I think that we are going to use our experiences with modulators to understand about when we're thinking about, what did you say? This way? Is that better? Okay. So when we think about what has happened with modulators to get them to people with CF, we have recognized now that there are many things that have impeded modulators for all. So when we think about how are we going to get to a cure for all, we need to start discussing now so we can plan and move that forward. And we have a wonderful, wonderful series of speakers that we are going to be introducing today. So to start things off, so hold on a second. So we are going to have all of our speakers present first. We want you to submit your questions through the app as you're ongoing. We are going to have a very robust panel discussion at the end with all the speakers with all the questions. So just be prepared for that. So to start us off is the wonderful Michelle Ann Patrovani, who is a dedicated educator whose work bridges research, practice, and advocacy to ensure equitable access to learning for all students. She is here today as a mother of two incredible men who received very delayed cystic fibrosis diagnoses and continued barriers to treatments that they deserve. This experience continues to shape her passion for promoting equity, resilience, and hope in education, medical care, and beyond. Please welcome Michelle.
Thank you.
Okay. You know how to do it? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Cure or close for all. I just want to emphasize that word close because a few people have asked me. When we talk about close for this presentation, we mean in proximity to, getting nearer to that cure. We do not mean close as in close a door. I do not have any relationships to disclose related to this presentation. Holding what matters. My family's story of CF, equity, and urgency. Good afternoon, everyone. I am honored and deeply humbled to be here today. I stand before you as a mother, a teacher, an immigrant, and an advocate, and through it all, as someone who has spent her entire life learning how to carry what matters, even when my arms were already full. My name is Michelle Patrovani. I was born in Trinidad and Tobago. My childhood was marked by pain that no one named, not family, not church, not school. What saved me was serving as a second mother to my baby sister who came along when I was age 6. At age 20, I came to the United States, the land of opportunity. My childhood caregiver responsibilities led to a nanny housekeeper job for a newborn and a 5-year-old, which came with green card sponsorship, but left me unable to access the resources I needed when life assaulted me. Those years taught me what healthy babies and children look like and how they ate, how they breathed, how they slept, how they grew. They also taught me what inequity feels like in your bones, how it shapes your choices, your health, your hope. For 20 years, I've been a special education teacher and school administrator, working with families who face the same inequities I've known. And I've been a single mother to my two greatest gifts, joys, and teachers, Nathan and Caleb. Both were born with cystic fibrosis. But it took 18 plus years to get their diagnoses. 18 years of being told, it's just asthma, it's just allergies, it's just in your head. 18 years of watching their lungs labor, their bodies break, their spirits struggle, their questions remain unanswered. 18 years of carrying them while the system looked away. When I speak today, I speak for them and for every CF patient and family, diagnosed early or late, here or across the world, who face the same battles for care, for access, for dignity. The night before writing this talk, I dreamt a past student had brought his baby brother to school in a bag. I picked up the baby and carried him as I taught. At some point, I dropped the baby. When I found him, he had shrunk to the size of my palm. His head was injured and blood was on the floor. He was barely breathing. I picked him up and ran to the nurse. That baby was not just a baby. He was every fragile thing I've ever carried. My sons, their health, their futures, my hope for them and their own. That dream is our life with CF. The tightrope walk, the balancing act, the exhausting, desperate fight for life. Carrying what matters while fearing you will lose your grip. Running for help and finding doors closed. My son's early years are a blur. Projectile vomiting, allergies, endless respiratory infections, wheezing, failure to thrive, constant coughing, sucking thick, bubbling mucus out of their nostrils. Manual percussion therapy I learned through research. Distended stomachs, calling out sick from work, multi-week visits to doctors and emergency rooms, nights wondering if my boys would be alive in the morning. Crying in doctors' offices and on the phone while begging for referrals to specialists and for the medicines they needed. Adenoid and sinus surgeries, emergency appendectomy, recurring skin rashes, chronic head, joint, and abdominal pain, repeated anaphylaxis, epigenetic wrinkling of the hands and feet, salty brows and skin, and a never-ending stream of medications. Their K-8 school and camp staff would later say, year after year, we have never seen children with so many medications. When baby, toddler, and childhood medication doses didn't work, I manually altered prescriptions to get increased doses and more refills. I researched and applied holistic remedies. Countless nights during his infancy, I slept upright with Nathan, almost vertical on my shoulder, because for the first 3 years of his life, health issues made it impossible for him to sleep lying down. Later, I taught Nathan how to keep Caleb upright. Even as a child, Nathan learned to carry his brother. We lived in the Bronx and Brooklyn in New York City, and I took one son, then two, from borough to borough, specialist to specialist, pediatricians, allergists, asthma specialists, ENTs, pulmonologists, gastroenterologists, urologists, and more. Each treated symptoms in isolation, never seeing the whole picture. Despite my words, typed pages of medical histories, symptoms, and medicines with dosages and frequencies, and despite my pleas to examine the severity, persistence, and confluence of symptoms, there has to be something more, became my cry. When Caleb was born, I recognized the signs, and I applied what I'd learned from parenting Nathan. Caleb fared better, but for the two boys, diagnoses still didn't come. Instead, their medical records constantly read bronchitis, pneumonia, asthma, seasonal, environmental, and food allergies, immune deficiencies, eczema, growing pains, and My boys lived with the pervasive isolation, loneliness, and heartbreak of children who often could not join in the lives of their peers. The toll was still heavier. We lost friends, we lost community, we lost family. My marriage ended. I gave up jobs when I could no longer carry my boys as Mount Everest on one shoulder, the demands of work as Mount Kilimanjaro on the other, and ride the raging tsunamis of doubt, fear, and powerlessness that persistently barreled through the valleys, in my mind and in theirs. In the spring of 2013, both boys continued to cough and clear their throats in haunting, heartbreaking solos and duets. Caleb's throat clearing, though, became nonstop. I was frustrated and I told him, it's just a habit, you have to try to control it. He couldn't. When his regular doctors had no answers, I cycled through another round of ERs and specialists. Nothing helped. Caleb grew weaker. He could no longer somersault, play basketball, or run with me in the park. Nor could he walk a city block or climb a flight of subway stairs without clutching the rail, gasping, imploring me to please slow down. One ENT examined him. I apologize, one moment. One ENT examined him and said, he has issues we need to address, but there is something more. Before I do anything, take him to the emergency room now. Over the next year, Caleb was diagnosed with pneumonia 6 times. Each time he was given heavier doses of prednisone and other medications. He was scared, I was terrified, we were hopeless. All these medicines and still no answers in almost 2 decades. In early 2014, we found a new allergist who finally listened when I said, again, on the 3rd visit, there has to be something more. The doctor paused. We were in the hallway. He tilted his head a little to the right and asked, what's your ethnicity? I replied, and his father's? I replied again. He quickly handed me a slip and said, go get this test done. 3 days later, May 8, 2014, the phone rang at work. Come in today, the receptionist said. It was not a request. My heart sank. I knew whatever they told me for Caleb would be the same for Nathan. 32 days later, on June 9, 2014, Nathan received his diagnosis. It was something more. When they were finally diagnosed, 4 months shy of their 19th and 15th birthdays, we knew grief, relief, and a new urgency all at once. Back then, the life expectancy for people with CF was 37 to 41 years. Today, a child with an early CF diagnosis has an average life expectancy of 61. That's progress. That's research. That's community and increasing equity. My sons have been on Pulmozyme and qualified for and taken Trikafta. Currently, neither has access to the medications they need. Nathan for 13 months and Caleb for 2. And Nathan has experienced long gaps in getting the pancreatic enzymes on which he depends. Insurance barriers and denials have hindered access, as well as cost supply issues and the weight of mental health struggles that ravage everything else. The biology of CF is brutal, but the barriers to diagnosis, treatment, and cure are just as relentless. Additionally, in the 11 years post-diagnosis, my sons have had experiences at hospitals in which doctors and staff decided based on their skin color that they could not have CF. That misperception, even in the face of documentation, has led to additional struggles to receive care. Access to emergency isolation rooms that sit and stare at us empty, begging for admission for CF tune-ups, refusals to run PICC lines and running IVs instead, resulting in complications, and even delays in receiving a diagnosis. Here is where my dream returns. I can only carry my CFers so far. In 2017, I emptied my savings and retirement accounts and moved to Florida, hoping to give both sons greater longevity and improved quality of life. However, a 60% pay cut and lack of opportunities made the move unsustainable. At times, Nathan was hospitalized in New York, while Caleb was hospitalized in Florida. I was torn in two. Today, my sons and I must continue running to the nurse, who, in our case, are the medical care providers, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, Compass, researchers, advocates, our government, and you, our extended CF family, to help hold them. In 2017, Nathan entered a spoken word contest for the first time and won. His original piece, though recorded at an angle, clearly I'm not a videographer, speaks to his experiences of brokenness. Brokenness by illness, color, poverty, isolation, loneliness, and unfulfilled longing. I must issue a warning. This 3-minute recording contains profanity and potentially triggering words. Please step out, or if you're online, mute if necessary. 3 minutes.
Bees in the trap. Bees in the trap.
I'm alive, and I thank God for it. I really ain't that religious, but I'm trying it. See, but I've been setting up my prayers, and I've been getting no reply for it. Curious. So what I'm trying for? I can say I'm thankful, but what I'm lying for? The only reason why I'm asking all these questions is I'm wondering if my life's worth dying for. Yeah. So can you blame me? Can you blame me if I'm a little angry that you can't see that the cards that you dealt me are clearly a little less than amazing? They'll say, okay, you need a directive. Matter of fact, what you lack is perspective. Spend some time with your friends when you stress over class too much, so take some more electives. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's nice. Matter of fact, what you said, you can say that twice. Everybody give it up for my man Mike. He had a problem once, and that makes him wise. Nah, get up out here with that bullshit. I'm never with that bullshit. Your shoulders could use a better head. I'm gonna tell you what my mama said. She said, boy, knowledge is a weapon. Especially for you, because your complexion is brown like the earth and giving birth. When I first saw you, knew it was God's work. In your eyes, I see the sun shine, and I'm just thankful that the sun's mine. Little light of mine, little light of mine, I'm gonna raise you up and you gon' shine. Yeah, you gon' shine, you gon' shine, you gon' shine. Do you hear me? You gon' shine, and you gon' shine, you gon' shine. So I'm trying to shine, I'm just trying to shine. Yo, you play too much, ma, I'm trying to shine, I'm just trying to shine. But nowadays, halfway is 50 years? What? And I'm just trying to make it there. But the facts don't back me up too well, so I'm kind of scared. And if I make it, is it really good news? Is it worth it if it ain't the whole you? Do I want a lot of years or a good few? And I'm over here, I'm asking what I should know. I'm asking what I could do. It's all that I'm asking, but I need answers now because I look at the time and all of it's just passing. Take a look through my glasses. No, really, take a look through my glasses. I know we all got our own path. It's just mine's going differently. It's draining my energy, feel for my mother and love for my brothers, but damn, what are we? If you're there, I'm just trying to unmask you. As a good nigga that could act rude, could I pull triggers if I had to? And if I did and I had to, does that mean I'm a bad dude? Ask the world, what has it done to a life? What does it go through tonight? Could I approach you? I might, but if I do know, it won't be done carefully, but out of fear and necessity. Your waters are testing me, aching to get at me, and I can't let them in. You said I could walk, but look at me swim. Through the thick and the thin, I think that I'm thin and yearning for nourishment, but learning is hard as shit. My soul, it needs harnessing and a bit less admonishing. What is an accomplishment when there's nothing to show when it's over? Just hope that I'll know when I'm older, if I'll have any love left to show her, if my heart will allow me to know her. With eyes that just can't stay in focus, it's easy to see how one could be hopeless, but I'm alive, right? Yeah!
Thank you. That always makes me cry, so I'm glad I don't have tears. Our story is not unique. It is the story of rural patients without clinics. It is the story of families in the US and across the globe where modulators are priced out of reach. It is the story of parents who know something is wrong but cannot get a diagnosis because of systemic bias, lack of awareness, lack of resources, or the color of their children's skin. When we say cure or close for all, we must mean all. Because treatment that reaches some is not treatment. And a cure that reaches some is not a cure. As Bijal P. Trivedi wrote in her book, Breath from Salt, CF is an equal opportunity disease, a disease that demands equal opportunity diagnosis, treatment, and cure. I am grateful for this community of fighters, researchers, and advocates. But the tsunamis keep coming. We must continue advocating for insurance reform, funding research that addresses biology and inequity, ensuring that every patient, regardless of ethnicity, knowledge, income, or geography, benefits from breakthroughs. In my dream, I didn't save the baby alone. I ran to the nurse. In real life, I cannot save my sons alone. I run to you. We are all carrying something precious. If we hold together with care and urgency, we can ensure that no one slips away. Not to CF and not to disparities. On behalf of Nathan, Caleb, and every CF family, thank you for carrying what matters. Thank you for fighting for a cure or close for all.
I've been instructed to swallow the mic, so here we go. Hi, my name is David Hansen. I'm also a father of children with CF. I have the privilege to be associated with these fantastic humans. It is my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Gail Pledger. She is a CF parent from England and the founder of a number of grassroots global campaigns, including Vertex Save Us and the Right to Breathe campaign. She is a senior organizer in the UK patient-led organization Just Treatment. Gail is a global health advocate dedicated to ensure equitable access to life-saving CF modulators. Welcome Gail to her presentation.
Hello, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here with such amazing speakers. So I'm delighted to come and share my story. I know that Jonathan, who's following me, is going to talk facts and figures about disparity in access, and so I'll leave that to him. His work is always amazing and just so enlightening. So I'm going to stick to the human reality of drug pricing and how that affects families around the world. I have no financial or commercial conflicts of interest to declare. I'm here as a CF mother and advocate representing thousands of CF families worldwide. My work is entirely non-profit and patient-led. My story really began about 10 years ago. I had a pretty typical life: a husband, 2 daughters, a cat. I wasn't particularly political. I've never contacted my MP before, and I'd never attended a protest, a fairly normal existence. But there was a black cloud hanging over my family. Our younger daughter, 11 years old back then, was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was 3 weeks old. And slowly, day by day, she was dying, basically. Despite daily physiotherapy, nebulizers, medication, and regular hospital stays, CF was winning, as it always did back then. Then came a glimmer of hope, or can be, a new drug from Vertex Pharmaceuticals that could treat the underlying cause of CF for my daughter, rather than just the symptoms. Having watched her suffer so much, I was determined to get it for her. Although not approved in England, we managed to secure early access because she was so ill back then. I believed wider approval would follow quickly. After all, the UK is one of the richest countries in the world, and surely pharmaceutical companies want patients to have access as quickly as possible, or so I thought. My daughter started taking Orkambi in 2016. It wasn't a miracle drug for her, but it stabilised her health and gave us time and hope. And we knew an even better drug, Kaftrio or Trikafta, was in the pipeline. Could you have water for me? Yes. My lips are good. Thank you. But months passed and there was no deal between our NHS health service and Vertex. The sticking point was the price, with a list price of over $250,000 per patient per year. Frustration grew in the UK CF community. Patients in the US were getting access, whilst thousands in the UK continued to suffer and die. A group of us, patients and families, came together to form a campaign group. We wrote letters to the Prime Minister, met with MPs, organised marches and protests, started a petition that reached 100,000 signatures and forced several parliamentary debates. We appeared on TV, in newspapers, and some of us met with the regulatory authorities like NICE, the NHS and Vertex. Despite the high profile of the campaign, there was still no deal. Years passed. We calculated that about 200 young people had died during the negotiations. And during this time, Vertex rejected what the government called the largest ever commitment of its kind in the NHS's 70-year history, and described Vertex as extreme outlier in terms of both pricing and behaviour. It was clear CF families in the UK were being held to ransom. While many in the larger campaign group wanted the NHS to pay whatever it took, a smaller group of us believed the solution was not for our health service to give in to unjustifiable prices. It was for Vertex to act fairly and responsibly and lower their prices. But how could we make that happen? In 2018, I was looking for ideas to go about this and connected with Just Treatment, who are a patient-led campaign organisation in the UK. We discovered that Orkambi could be made for around about $5,000 a year, and nowhere near the $250,000 list price. Outraged, we developed a new strategy called Plan B. We put it to our government that they had 2 choices. Plan A, make an immediate deal with Vertex. Plan B, use a compulsory licence, also known as a Crown Use licence in the UK, a legal mechanism under the World Trade Organisation's TRIPS agreement that allows governments to authorise the manufacture or import of a patented medicine without the patent holder's consent in order to protect public health. At the same time, we also discovered that a company in Argentina was already legally making generic Orkambi called Lucafta, which strengthened our case. A cheaper alternative already existed, and all they had to do was break the patent. At that point, we created the CF Buyers Club online to connect families directly with a generic manufacturer so that those who could afford it could legally purchase the medicine for personal use. It's a great shame that since this time, Argentinian prices for generic modulators have also become prohibitive. We continued lobbying the government. Pressure grew across political parties. In June 2019, the Health Secretary told Parliament the government had a moral obligation to consider all options, including a compulsory licence. The government and Vertex were under huge pressure. There was talk of our government breaking the patent on Orkambi, an unprecedented move that finally gave the NHS some negotiating power. Just 4 months after this public statement, in October 2019, a deal for Orkambi was announced to the great relief of families across the UK, and we were told by sources close to the negotiations that Plan B had been an important catalyst. The groundwork had been done, and the following year, in June 2020, the NHS secured a deal for Kaftrio without another fight. My daughter started Kaftrio that year, and it completely transformed her life. Since then, she's had no hospital admissions, no IVs, no coughing, and no nebulizers. She can laugh and breathe easily for the first time, and she is now studying and having fun at university. But knowing how long and hard we had fought for access, we knew there would be thousands of other families around the world still fighting. So exactly 5 years ago, in October 2020, I co-founded grassroots global campaign group Vertex Save Us as a way to share what we had learned and help other CF families push for access too. Within months, we had thousands of supporters across 60 countries. With the campaign continuing to grow, in February 2023, we joined forces with Just Treatment Again and launched the Right to Breathe campaign. This was marked by CF families in 4 countries on 4 continents filing demands for compulsory licenses on the same day. The countries were Brazil, India, South Africa, and Ukraine. This unprecedented global action was covered in the New York Times. It's important to note that since then, these 4 countries had gained full or partial access to Trikafta. But we continue to fight for anyone left behind, and we've helped to secure access in multiple other countries. Something else I've learned from this whole experience is that there is an incredible global network of human rights experts, lawyers, and academics who are passionate about access to medicines. So as well as CF families, some amazing clinicians and supported associations, we work with these incredibly knowledgeable advocates. And by giving families the legal tools and knowledge to fight for their children's lives within their own country, we create a powerful and unstoppable force. There is no bigger incentive than fighting for the life of your child. Last year, I was also lucky to work with some academics and researchers to have ETI, Trikafta, added to the World Health Organization's essential medicine list, a major step to increase pressure on both Vertex and governments to ensure access for all. A couple of those researchers, Grace and Ben, are in the room with us today, and Jonathan reviewed the application, so some of them are here today. We put in a 98-page submission, and I travelled to Geneva with another CF mum, Isela, from Albania, to present our case in person and the reality of life with and without modulators. It was an incredible moment of celebration when our application succeeded, and in September, ETI became the first CF-specific drug ever added to the essential medicine list, and marks a turning point for WHO, who acknowledge their role as a tool for use for access. Yet even now, thousands of families still can't access modulators. The barriers are clear: price and monopoly power. For 13 years, these barriers have determined who gets to live and who doesn't. But today I can share some important news. Those barriers are being dismantled. This short video shows what is about to change.
For nearly 13 years, modulators have been saving the lives of people with CF. People with CF have known there were medicines that could change their lives, but for many, they were out of reach.
For years, we have lost our friends and loved ones in the CF community.
For years, we have been watching and getting sicker.
For years, we have begged Vertex for access.
For years, Vertex has ignored us, offering only token gestures.
We cannot wait any longer.
No podemos esperar más.
No podemos esperar más.
Today, we are taking matters into our own hands. We are launching the CF Buyers Club 2 to help patients around the world access a new generic version of Trikafta, Trico. For the price of treating one child with Trikafta, 58 children can be treated with Trico. In the US, Trikafta costs $370,000 a year. Trico will cost as little as $12,750 for adults, $6,375 for children, and with reduced dosing strategies, around $2,000 a year per child. This is the breakthrough the CF community has been waiting for. The monopoly is over, affordable treatment is here. Find out more at cfbuyersclub.org.
Oh my God. Oh, I'm so scared. Oh. What you just saw is real. And if you want to know what 58 children look like, just look at these pictures. For one child, all of these children will be able to be treated. Today we can finally announce that a new legally produced generic version of Trikafta is coming. The same active ingredients, a quality assured alternative, but at a fraction of the price. This medicine is being legally produced by Beximco Pharmaceuticals, a globally respected generic drug manufacturer that has secured multiple drug approvals from stringent regulatory authorities supplying its medicines to countries around the world. We are working with renowned regulatory and pharmaceutical experts to ensure the safety and efficacy of the product. It will be ready to be shipped from the first quarter of 2026, with patients and families able to use personal use exemptions to enable the importation of the medicine, even if Vertex has a patent in place. We will also keep working to get governments to overcome all barriers to providing universal access to Trico on their health systems. This is what happens when we challenge monopoly power and put people before profit. It's proof that access for all isn't just a dream, it's happening. Now, I would like to invite some incredible people onto the stage, all of whom are fighting for access to modulators for themselves, their children, and their countries. Mums, Juan, Martin, come up. Later, we're going to be holding another meeting at 6:45 at the hotel across the road for anybody who wants further information. And these are all CF mums that don't have access or are fighting for their country. They'll all be speaking there. But I did want to speak to Juan Martin, who's from Ecuador. He's a patient who is not been able to access this drug. So I was just going to ask him a couple of questions. You can come to the microphone.
Hi everyone. So my name is Juan Martin Larrea. I am from Ecuador and I am a cystic fibrosis patient. So for the last 18 years, I have been struggling with this genetic disorder in which I have been fighting every single day to get better, to fight and be determined to be a better person, to be also very hopeful for more advancements. Thank you.
So did you mention all this time how you felt like not having access to this drug?
Okay, so I want to answer this question with a different perspective. So I have felt a lot of emotions throughout the years, and now that there's more medicine, I have come to realize that there's a very emotion, particularly everyone here has this feeling. Everyone here feels anger. What's anger? It's a natural response in which you basically feel bad for the things that are not fair. And every single one here, I think we know it's not fair how the system has treated us between all of these years. For example, Michelle, which has been had very much struggle throughout the years with her children. My mom, which have been fighting every single time to get medical attendance and all of that. It has been a real struggle for my family, and practically everyone here in this room can actually relate to this emotion of anger towards the unfairness of the situation. And another feeling I want to share is hope. The hopes and dreams of every single child with this new opportunity of Trico. TRICO has given us hopes and dreams to prosperate and have a better life quality. This is my answer. Thank you.
On that note, if you want to hear any more, you can come to the meeting room or we'll be answering questions later in the session.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I just want to say thank you to Gail, thank you to Michelle for sharing your stories, and thank you to the audience for being here and listening. My name is Tanisha Daly. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Jonathan Guo. He's a medical resident in internal medicine at the Royal Free Hospital in London and an honorary research associate at the Imperial College. His research in CF centers around international disparities in diagnosis and effective treatment, with a focus on widening access to highly effective modulator therapies. Thank you.
Great. So thank you. Hello. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks. So today I'll be discussing global access to CFTR modulators with a focus primarily on ETI, a bit about the past, a bit about the present, a bit more about the future, and I promise only a little bit out of date as of just now. Okay, so I have no relevant disclosures. So the transformative effects of CFTR modulators cannot be overstated. However, they are extremely expensive, with the launch price of ETI equivalent to median house prices in the UK. Therefore, the only realistic way for people to receive treatment is reimbursement by national bodies, leading to large time differentials in global access pending negotiations. And this is seen even within Europe, where almost all countries are classified as high income. These delays and consequent inequities in access confirm market disparities in health. For example, this study of European registry data stratified countries into 3 groups based on GNI, with significant disparities observed in ETI access. And this translated directly to patient outcomes, as seen through marked improvements in lung function in 2021, corresponding with modulator access in high and middle income countries, with those in lower income settings where poorer pre-modulator outcomes were already experienced left behind. Though progress has been made, as of 2023, the ECF registry, across the ECFS registry, almost a quarter of eligible patients were still not receiving treatment. And challenges will continue as the recent label expansion begins to translate into national reimbursement and HTA of the new vanzacaftor triple continues. Beyond just delays in many LMICs, national reimbursement of modulators is simply infeasible at current prices, and it's therefore likely that this phenomenon of widening gaps will be replicated globally. And looking ahead, disparities in access will likely continue to prevent clinical trial expansion into LMICs, given the ethical challenges of asking patients to assume the risks of a trial if they may not stand to benefit from the results. As was demonstrated in 2018, when recruitment was ceased in France following failed negotiations for the reimbursement of Orkambi, until a deal was made the following year. So what's the current global landscape of modulator access? Whilst there is a distinct lack of transparent data, currently by our measure, ETI is reimbursed in around 58 countries. It's accessible via alternative arrangements in several others, and there are 63 countries with a documented disease burden where ETI is not reimbursed currently, almost exclusively LMICs. However, in late 2023, Vertex, who retains global exclusive monopoly rights, announced a novel donation program with the non-profit Direct Relief. Now, broadly speaking, donation programs can be favored by companies as they allow them to avoid changes to pricing, alongside the building of goodwill, and specifically in the US, render them eligible for enhanced tax deductions capped at 2 times the cost basis of any donated products. Yet in the long term, such programs can in fact be harmful for access as they undercut generic manufacturers and thereby eliminate competition, rendering patients and health systems reliant on the goodwill of private companies. Consequently, it's widely accepted that they are not an effective way to provide long-term access for patients. And this is reflected in the policies of numerous organizations who do not accept in-kind donations outside of exceptional circumstances. Indeed, within its own guidelines for medicines donations, the WHO explicitly states that they are not a long-term solution to lack of access to medicines. Nevertheless, they do have a role to play, generally as temporary solutions to defined problems. And accordingly, such organizations do outline several key principles for an effective program. And indeed, any measure to improve access represents progress and should be judged on its own merits. So looking specifically at the Vertex program, this currently includes 14 countries. To try and determine the potential impact of the program, we conducted literature searches to establish the documented disease burden in countries without access to modulators. We found the estimated number of people diagnosed with CF in donation program countries was about 3,100, compared with about 12,500 across all countries without reimbursement, equating to coverage of about 25%. And notably, we were unable to identify any patients in Ivory Coast, Tanzania, or Uganda, nor any cases of CF documented in the recent literature. Looking more closely at the current sample of countries, we can see they fall into a variety of different income groups, and there appears to be no clear link when comparing other factors, such as the existence of national CF registries, newborn screening, or wider health service strength. And conversely, other countries with higher documented disease burdens, stronger CF infrastructure, and in which direct relief already operate are not included. Accordingly, in its current form, the Vertex program falls short of global need, and it's difficult to discern the principles guiding selection of countries for inclusion. Furthermore, there's little information available about the wider aims, scope, or long-term sustainability of the program, nor any indication of impact or accountability, with the only publicly available information being in a handful of press releases. And finally, most importantly of all, modulators must be taken lifelong, meaning that access to life-saving medication becomes reliant on continued goodwill. And this must be viewed in the context of previous measures taken by the originator that have worked to limit access. For example, in Australia, where compassionate access to ETI was discontinued following a negative recommendation from the PBAC, or the decision to slash long-standing copay assistance programs for patients in the US, and filing of patents in countries where modulators had not been submitted for regulatory approval or attempts made at market entry, thereby effectively blocking alternative routes to access for patients, with legal actions even taken against generic producers looking to supply underserved countries, standing in contrast to other companies who choose to file, to not file, or selectively enforce patents in comparable situations. And fundamentally, a donation program fails to address the key systemic issues that drive contemporary disparities, namely prohibitively high prices driven by restrictive patents, with protections for ETI in place until at least 2037, and few competitors outside of early stage development. Now, drug pricing is a notoriously opaque topic and yet central to the solubility of the problem. Therefore, I think it's worth exploring whether prices need to be this high. In other words, is this simply an unpleasant but immutable cost of innovation? Now, there are generally three main factors put forward as driving high prices. These are the costs of manufacturing novel treatments, the significant resources invested over many years on their development with high associated risk, and finally, the value provided for patients and health systems. To address the first point, our analysis estimating minimum production costs for CFTR modulators based upon active pharmaceutical ingredient indicate that these lie 98% lower than list prices. And this is validated by the availability of real-world availability of generic versions marketed at a fraction of the cost despite limited competition. Furthermore, within their submission for ETI to the PBAC in Australia, the originators themselves have estimated that loss of exclusivity and entry of generic competitors would result in price reductions of 90%. With regard to R&D costs, even if we were to assume that all of Vertex's R&D expenditure from 2001 until the release of ETI was only spent on the development of CFTR modulators, which of course is a completely unrealistic assumption, even then, adjusted for inflation, these costs have still been recouped 3 times over. It must also be considered that a significant proportion of the initial modulator research was directly funded by patient organizations to mitigate the high levels of risk inherent to early stage development. For example, the CFF contractually agreed to fund 70% of the initial research into corrector molecules between 2006 and 2008. And finally, cost-effectiveness analyses by national and independent bodies have concluded that the benefits of modulators, while profound, do not warrant their prices, recommending reductions of between 70 and 90%. At a systems level, real-world longitudinal data have demonstrated that savings from reductions in exacerbations, hospitalizations, and cessation of treatments are greatly outstripped by the medication costs of ETI. Now, it's worth acknowledging that progress has been made. This was the state of global access for any modulator as of January 2020, around 7 years after the initial release of ivacaftor. The past few years have seen additional reimbursements, but also a number of alternative measures that have achieved access in countries where this wasn't initially feasible. And so what strategies have worked and are they applicable more broadly? As previously alluded to, patent rights weren't granted for Vertex modulators in Argentina. Therefore, generics are widely available, with access enshrined in national legislation. Yet commercial export of generic medications into jurisdictions where they remain under patent is restricted, and therefore the market is largely limited to Argentinian CF patients. However, many countries do allow importation of limited quantities of medication strictly for personal use. One pertinent example of this was South Africa, where people with sufficient financial means began regularly traveling to Argentina to purchase biannual supplies of generic modulators out of pocket. Whilst a fraction of list prices, understandably many were still forced to switch to a twice-weekly modulator-sparing dosing regimen with concurrent use of cytochrome P450 inhibitors to reduce hepatic metabolism, a cost-saving strategy also seen in other areas such as the use of ritonavir in ARV combinations for HIV. Additionally, in South Africa, Vertex secured patents for ETI despite not registering the drug to be sold there. Accordingly, in 2022, the Competition Commission launched a formal investigation alongside this, a legal case seeking a compulsory license for ETI was started by a CF patient with the support of several other organizations. Following this significant pressure, in 2024, an agreement was made in South Africa providing treatment to patients with the highest level of insurance coverage. Whilst providing access for some, this policy has further linked health to socioeconomic status and excludes those with the greatest need. In Uruguay, about 80 people were able to successfully access originator modulators through legal challenges. As a result, the government was compelled to supply these at close to list price, spending $22 million in 2023. Therefore, in 2024, it was deemed to be in the wider public interest for a compulsory license to be issued and the process started. And following this, later that year, a new offer was presented to the government and accepted for reimbursement. And so the common theme running through these examples and several others is the power of patent challenges, or even just the threat of them, as a tool to drive change. And the reason why this can be so effective is demonstrated clearly in the case of Russia, where modulators had initially been reimbursed, however later a compulsory license issued and patients switched to an Argentinian generic. However, it doesn't seem sustainable to pursue global access via individual campaigns and patchwork compromises in dozens of jurisdictions, each with differing legal frameworks, levels of patient organization, and overall political will. Clearly, a broader approach is needed. Given that the main barrier to accessing LMICs is high prices, one seemingly straightforward solution is to simply lower the price in these settings, a practice known as tiered or differential pricing. However, the issue remains that when the originator retains absolute power over pricing in a monopoly, the impetus falls on them to set equitable prices as they see fit. Therefore, this remains a largely arbitrary decision which can lead to significant variation between different countries but divorced of demand, clinical need, or actual affordability. In contrast, it's been repeatedly demonstrated that one of the key mechanisms for sustainably improving patient access is generic competition. This is because producers will compete to capture the market, thereby naturally reducing prices to the level of affordability in each setting. In the past, this has generally been best introduced for patented medicines through voluntary licensing, whereby manufacturers in resource-limited areas are authorized to sell generic versions in exchange for royalties. And the most recent and promising development is the addition of ETI to the WHO's Model Essential Medicines list just a few weeks ago. This came as a result of an application by our team last year with the support of numerous other stakeholders whom I would like to take this moment to acknowledge and also to thank. So for a bit of background, the EML is a compendium of treatments deemed to address priority health needs. Notably, the WHO list is a model with member states free to adopt or adapt as is deemed contextually relevant. Nonetheless, it's highly influential, being used by many countries around the world to guide public health funding and priorities. The concept of essential medicines were created really with the original intent of establishing a minimum common baseline for healthcare delivery and the allocation of health resources worldwide. Since then, the concept has evolved, with the most significant change being made in 2002 when the current definition was implemented. The list is updated every 2 years through an open, evidence-based application process. These are reviewed by an international expert committee and are contingent on strong evidence in 4 main domains: disease prevalence, therapeutic efficacy, safety, and cost-effectiveness. As the first medicine on the list exclusively indicated to treat CF, the decision to add ETI recognizes the transformative benefits it provides, alongside our changing understanding of the global epidemiology of CF. Indeed, when I was in medical school, admittedly not that long ago, I was taught that CF was an Anglo-Saxon disease. Yet significant challenges do remain around cost effectiveness and consequent disparities in access, and this was explicitly acknowledged by the committee. Indeed, the decision is likely to reignite prominent debate about the intrinsic purpose of the list itself. Some contend that it should return closer to its original remit as a practical utilitarian guide for the functioning of health systems in LMICs to deliver maximum public health benefit, even if this requires the exclusion of the most novel and effective treatments. Others argue that it should constitute a more aspirational means to improving health equity through advocating for access to medicines of public health significance towards the ultimate goal of universal health coverage. With one of the highest and most controversial price tags of any currently sold therapeutic, there's perhaps no better single example to encapsulate this debate than ETI. This is also not the first time that a controversially expensive treatment has been added to the EML. Namely in 2002, when the selection process was changed to specify that treatments would no longer be excluded on the basis of costs alone, leading to the addition of 12 patented antiretrovirals for the treatment of HIV at prices up to $10,000 per year. This marked a pivotal change in policy, given that the same medications had been rejected in 2000 due to their high prices, and was seen again in 2015 with the addition of several direct-acting antivirals costing up to $80,000 per course. In both of these cases, the decisions were viewed as bold and controversial, yet ultimately EML classification acted as a catalyst for the negotiation of voluntary licenses through the medicines patent pool, enabling sustainable access for millions of people in some of the world's most resource-limited areas, and shifting the entire paradigm of what constitutes an essential medicine. The addition of ETI stands to raise similar questions. The EML itself was first published in a completely different pharmaceutical ecosystem, and over a decade before the CFTR gene was even isolated. In this new era, what are we prepared to accept as a necessary versus aspirational level of healthcare coverage? Indeed, there's a strong legal precedent of patients in LMICs obtaining access to essential medicines through similar arguments relating to the human right to life and health. And as previously mentioned, such routes have also been used in several jurisdictions to gain access to ETI, obliging payers to procure these at close to list prices, therefore incurring significant opportunity costs. And given the fiscal challenges posed, such actions provide further leverage to the patent holder in any subsequent negotiations. The EML itself also holds far more influence towards LMICs compared with high-income countries, with longitudinal evidence suggesting that changes to the model list guide decision-making in these settings. Accordingly, the addition of ETI could trigger countries to consider, or indeed to reconsider, provision. Now, often, unfortunately, the discourse around such an emotive topic as access to medicines can become distorted and reductive, pitting patients against policymakers and health technology assessors. Accordingly, when the outcome of an appraisal or a decision to deny coverage is deemed socially unacceptable, it can be politically expedient to seek short-term solutions, usually through ad hoc, bespoke arrangements to provide funding outside of traditional mechanisms. For example, in 2005, when a new treatment for HER2-positive breast cancer priced at $70,000 per course received a negative recommendation from NICE. Following significant and high-profile public backlash, the British Health Secretary personally intervened to overrule the decision and authorize reimbursement, even going so far as to later set up a separate appraisal and funding system for novel cancer treatments through a managed access model. Yet ultimately, such ad hoc solutions are rarely successful or sustainable. And so what are the wider budgetary impacts of these decisions? Unfortunately, data for individual drugs generally remains confidential as a condition of access. However, some spending data stratified by therapeutic area is published from NHS England. This is split further into medicines issued in hospitals in the community and is inclusive of confidential discounts. Looking specifically at mucolytics, this contains CFTR modulators alongside several other medications that are generally off patent and have been used in practice for some time. When hospital-issued mucolytic spending is mapped against the number of patients receiving modulators, we see a close association with a marked increase in 2020. From 2016 to 2023, mucolytic spending increased by over 1,000%, now standing 3 times greater than spending on all other hospital-issued respiratory medicines. And in fact, in 2023, mucolytics made up 32% of all respiratory drug expenditure, now composing the 6th highest of all therapeutic subcategories and 3% of all medicine spending in England. And the downstream effects of this are clear. ETI is the 10th highest revenue drug currently on the market, despite being sold to less than 70,000 people globally in 2024. Furthermore, a recent UK-based analysis of all new NICE-approved drugs from 2000 to 2020 found that if the resources allocated to these treatments had instead been spent on existing NHS services, this would have resulted in a net gain of 5 million quality-adjusted life years. In other words, in the context of finite budgets, the opportunity costs associated with reimbursement of such high-cost therapies confer net negative impacts on wider public health. As such, the listing of ETIs in essential medicine represents a pivotal moment that must be approached with caution. Rather than pressuring health systems in resource-limited areas to fund high-cost treatments at the expense of wider population health, the decision should instead provide an impetus for equitable global access through voluntary licensing, a policy which has already been shown to be effective and appears equally viable in this case. Voluntary licensing balances financial reward with sustainable, equitable access and has a proven track record across a number of therapeutic areas, with robust mechanisms for governance and implementation already in place. Indeed, it's a policy already used by many industry peers who continue to be able to innovate and grow. When first announced, the pricing of CFTR modulators was the source of significant controversy and negative decisions in health technology assessment. Yet confidential reimbursement deals have now been made in most high-income countries, setting the precedent that high prices will ultimately be paid to great commercial success. At the same time, we've seen an increasing trend towards high-cost medications for smaller and more precisely targeted subpopulations, with half of all new FDA-approved drugs being classified as orphan drugs. And where before orphan diseases were deemed commercially unattractive or risky due to small patient populations, such treatments are increasingly generating revenues equal to or greater than those for more common conditions. In this way, it's clear that moving forward, the challenges of resource allocation and fair access will remain pervasive, especially in the era of genetic therapies with even higher anticipated price tags. This is exemplified by the release of Casgevy, a $2.2 million genetic therapy for sickle cell disease, which represents another of the most prevalent genetic conditions worldwide and a disease where the majority of the burden lies in LMICs. Now, the challenge of bridging the gap and achieving equitable access is and will be complex, but it is also a path that has been walked before with proven strategies and frameworks, and at the same time represents an ambitious opportunity. Such policies that have already been successful in other areas and adopted by other companies demonstrate that in this case, the remaining question with regard to access is not one of feasibility, but of political will. And notably, following the progress made in other therapeutic areas, the MPP itself has since expanded its remit to all essential medicines and added ETI to its watch list for in-licensing. 13 years after the initial release of ivacaftor, we have the ability to intervene early and reduce disease progression for more people than ever in LMICs. It is difficult to ask them to continue to wait in good faith whilst watching successive innovations be superseded and others live longer, healthier lives. CF has led the way and served as an exemplar for other rare and chronic diseases in developing models of care, patient and public involvement, and ultimately novel transformative targeted therapies. And so too can CF set the precedent of fair access in the era of precision medicine. Thank you very much.
So for our final speaker before our panel discussion, I would like to introduce Dr. Tracy Kazmierski, who's coming in from the back, is an amazing pediatric pulmonologist and health services researcher that focuses on improving the comprehensive care of adolescents and adults with CF. Her lab conducts community-engaged research to assure that their work is aligned with and responsive to the needs and wants of the CF community. Her current projects are centered on the health outcomes of parents with CF, the decision-making and experiences of people with CF pursuing parenthood, and understanding the interplay between having CF and being a member of the research community. And so welcome to Dr. Kazmierski.
Amazing.
You made it. Welcome. Thanks.
I got it.
You just stand real close to the microphone.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Megan. I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk about community engagement and partnerships in research. And I think the line that's going to go through this presentation and what you've just heard is that the voice of the patient and family is just so mission critical to everything that we do. So I want to talk today a little bit about how we assure that the research that we do is relevant and responsive to the needs of people with CF and their families. So these are my disclosures. And I just want to put out a little map of what I'm going to talk about today. So first I'm going to talk about what is community engaged research. what does that really mean? And why does this matter? How do you do it? And how do you know you're doing a good job? And then how can we enhance community engaged research in CF? And that is where I really want to challenge the audience as you're listening and reading the slides to think about how we can do better as a group. So I'm going to start with a story. This is a very specific target. So my mentor is Liz Miller. She's an adolescent medicine doc in Pittsburgh, where I am. And she's an expert in community engaged research. The voice of the community is in everything that she does and every study she designs. And thus, when I started my training and my fellowship, she guided me to build relationships with people with CF in my own research. So as I started my research and for my Schwachman Award, which was a K Career Development Award equivalent from the CF Foundation, I had worked with people with CF to propose a tool for teens with CF to really educate them about sexual and reproductive health. So one day, I was on the phone in this target that you see on the screen with two of my collaborators who were people with CF, Molly Pam and Laura Mensch. And I'm always multitasking because I'm a parent, so I was doing two things at once and buying something for my kids and having this call. And I was describing the study to them, and Molly said something that really was striking. She said, well, that sounds really nice, but I really need help with if, when, and how I should become a parent. And I think the easy thing to do in that moment would be to say, okay, that sounds like something else that should be done, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. But that's not really community engaged research, and it's not really listening to the person that is a partner with you in this work. So I pivoted and I changed the project completely and what I was doing. And instead, I worked with Molly and other people with CF, and we created a tool called My Voice, which is a reproductive health decision support tool to help people with CF decide if, when, and how they should become parents. I continue to work with Molly. We were here together last year, and that is her daughter, Lila, who I texted with her this morning. Not Lila, Molly. And she's 20 months old. And, I think that Molly and I value our friendship and our collaboration and continue to work on projects to help people with CF pursue their reproductive futures, which often involves parenthood. But I want to take you back to this idea, because that was a nice story, but I really want to go back into the science of community engagement in research. And I first want to talk about how community engaged research is really a spectrum. And in projects that I've done, I've really been along this spectrum with people with CF. But I think the goal is really to have a lot of engagement and a lot of partnership and really a dialogue, and to be on this side of the spectrum to make sure that this work remains relevant. This is a big wordy slide, which I don't usually like to do, but I think there's lots of principles of high quality community engaged research that I want to highlight. You're going to see some words in bold as I read this, and those really highlight how important it is that this is collaborative and mutually beneficial and relevant. But I think you really want to recognize the community as a unit of identity, and we'll talk about what that community is in CF and in other studies in a bit. And build on strengths and resources within that community. And in CF Care, we have many. This is something that you hope to facilitate collaborative, equitable partnerships in all phases of research and promote co-learning and capacity building between partners. So you are learning from them and they are learning from you. And then there's a balance between getting the research done and then action for the mutual benefit of all partners. So it is not just a take from people with CF to make your study better. Emphasizing the local relevance of public health problems and perspectives that recognize and attend to multiple determinants of health and disease is really critical. And involving systems development through an iterative process. You're not going to get it right the first time, and you shouldn't just put things together one time. And then finally, dissemination of findings to everyone involved, not just in peer-reviewed journals, but out to the community through different channels. And then a long-term commitment to this as a process and a partnership, not a one and done, thank you for your help with this project, we won't talk with you again. So there's lots of strengths, and I hope I highlighted those, and you can see them on the slide. If you do community engaged research and you're talking to people with CF, you're assuring that what you're studying and how you're doing it is relevant to them, and they have ownership over it. It can build their capacity and their skills, and it builds your skills as a researcher to be a listener. It can build trust and bridge community academic barriers, which may be quite vast, especially for certain populations. It can support social action and impart in-depth knowledge of community context, needs, and assets. It deepens your interpretation of your results. So you may read something one way as an academic researcher, and a community member may sit next to you and say, that's not what they mean. And then finally, you can directly use these results for sustainable changes, and this is where dissemination comes into play quite a bit. But you need to take the time to form partnerships. It is weird to go up to someone and say, I'm gonna need your time commitment for a very long time, for a very intensive thing, and not really know them well or build rapport. I can't tell you how uncomfortable I was to email my program officer at the CF Foundation and tell them I was changing my entire career development award. That is a complete loss of control over what I already had funded. And I think you have to be comfortable with that. If someone from the community or a group of people from the community tells you that's a good idea or that's not a good idea and you should change it. If you're working with a small community, for instance, if I was just working with people in Pittsburgh where I live and work, those research ideas and outputs may not be generalizable outside of that context. You have to be flexible. And as a type A, very list-oriented person, flexibility can sometimes be a learned skill. And timeframes for reporting results may be different. If somebody partners with you on something and they're not an academic person, they're gonna think it's very strange when a year later you're not telling them what you found. And we don't even blink an eye in academics if something's not published in a journal in that time frame. Certainly with any partnership, there can be conflicts on dissemination strategies and decisions, and community partners and academic partners may have differing opinions on methods choice. And finally, community engaged research, I hope this is becoming less, but I think it may be valued less in an academic environment compared to basic translational or more traditional clinical research. So why would you do this? There's a mountain of evidence that this makes things better. It enhances the recruitment and retention of diverse study participants. You can see all the cited studies on the bottom here. It improves meaningful dissemination of findings and further innovation. And the National Institutes of Health has really recognized that this is an important thing to invest in and do. And really this website, I hope it's still active, it might not be, but it may address differences in healthcare access and outcomes, build trust in science, and improve health knowledge. So this is and was recognized by the NIH as really clearly important for how we do science. So how do you know you're doing a good job? I'm gonna go through the who, what, where, when, and how of this, and really thinking through who's the community. How are you defining that? And how do you successfully recruit people as your community partners? What are you asking of them? Where and when are you meeting? And then how do you engage them and partner together? It's one thing to get people in a room or a virtual Zoom meeting, but we've all been in meetings that are run poorly, and that's not fun for anyone. So really thinking about thoughtful engagement and respecting people's time and expertise. So to start, I think defining the community and getting feedback on which perspectives should be included is really critical. And partnering with advocacy organizations and patient groups to recruit your community partners can be really invaluable. And there's lots of ways to do that in the CF community, one of which is Community Voice. It's the first time I'm saying their name, it won't be the last. But there's other advocacy organizations in CF, like CFRI, like Emily's Entourage, like the Boomer Esiason Foundation, where there's deep involvement of patients and families, and really thoughtful people who are thinking of their own experiences, as well as experiences of all people with CF. I think it's thoughtful for any partnership to outline what your ask is, really understanding what the content of your meetings is, the frequency, and really importantly, trying to budget and pay people for their time, because that is a sign of respect, and that is what we would want done for us. I think structuring meetings and touch points thoughtfully with time for dialogue, not just didactically presenting what your study design is and giving 5 minutes for questions on the end, is really important. And offering multiple ways to provide input and feedback. There are people who are going to feel great about unmuting on a Zoom and telling you you're wrong. And there are going to be people who don't feel comfortable doing that in a big group and want an anonymous survey link at the end, or want to get on a phone call individually with you. And I think offering all of those opportunities is important. So how do you know you're doing a good job? You ask them. There's some tools out there, I won't say a lot, but there are some tools out there for looking at how we do community engagement in research. This is out of the University of New Mexico's Engage for Equity project. And they really have an evaluation survey that can be completed by the principal investigator and community and academic partners, as well as evaluation interviews to deeply explore how a community engaged research partnership is doing. So what I want to do with the rest of the time that I have is walk you through an actual study that is using community engaged research. This study is called Pride CF, and this is funded by the CF Foundation to explore the interplay of having CF and identifying as an LGBTQI+ person. This QR code on the screen can get you connected with the Pride study so you can learn what our study team is doing and results as they come through and opportunities for engagement and partnership. But let me tell you a little bit about our community partners. So I'm going to go through that same structure of the who, what, where, when, and how. So the who for our community partners are people with CF from diverse identities and backgrounds, parents of LGBTQI+ people with CF, multidisciplinary CF providers, and this is a total of 10 folks. We recruited them through our study team's personal connections and colleagues, as well as partnering with the CFF Community Voice to recruit people from different identities and with lived experience. So what? What did they do? We engaged and identified these people before we put in the grant application to the CF Foundation, and they gave us feedback on the structure of the proposal from the beginning. And I think that this was really critical in assuring the success of the funding and ensuring that we were off and running when we were funded. We want their focus and really try to engage everyone throughout the project on feedback on study design, surveys, interview content, recruitment strategies, dissemination plans, troubleshooting, and next steps. We have optional authorship for all our community partners and optional participation in data analysis. I'll talk you through a little bit how we're actually going to do that. And we compensate everybody for each meeting they attend, and I think that's critical. We meet quarterly on Zoom throughout the award. We have email touch points. We also had a study team meeting in person before this this conference, and several of our community partners were able to be in the room with us and join us for that whole day in an immersive experience, which is really wonderful. We try to structure our meetings when we have community partners in the room with PIs and study team members who have experience in training in community engaged research. We have clear asks and times for feedback from community partners in each meeting and via email, and we routinely disseminate study findings and updates via email. And we really want to make sure we're doing a good job. So we're evaluating our community engagement, and we've adapted that Engage for Equity survey that I showed you. We just did an evaluation 2 days ago. I haven't looked at the data, but I know that there's things that we can do better, and I know that there's things that can be streamlined and improved, and I think it's just important to routinely check in on the health of any partnership, especially one that's including community partners who may have other jobs and other responsibilities. Community engaged research, I think, I'm biased, is very cool, and there's a lot of innovation that's going on in this space, and I want to highlight a couple things that are going on at my own institution at the University of Pittsburgh in our CTSI. So this is really led out of the Community Partners Core. And the goal of this core at our CTSI is to connect researchers with community members and organizations, and to facilitate these bidirectional partnerships that promote participation in research as well as trust in that process and support these efforts. So they've done a lot of things and are a wonderful resource. And one thing they've done is they've standardized some replicable tools. Partnership and authorship agreements, so people understand their goals and expectations for this work. How to pay people, community partner payment processes, which if you've paid anybody in academics through invoicing can be a nightmare. So this is really helpful. Translation services to assure that your outreach is equitable and accessible. They have expertise in human-centered design, and they have their own community-engaged research measurement tools. The other thing that they run is something called Community Engagement Studios. And the CTSI staff can run this for you, but when our team has used it for other studies, we've run it ourselves with their help. But this is really a listening session where you, as a principal investigator, need to have no experience in community engaged research. But you partner with the CTSI, pitch them what your studies or grant is going to be, and they bring community members together for you, or you can bring them yourselves, to discuss the design, outreach strategies, recruitment, data interpretation, and dissemination. We did this for a grant we put into the NIH a couple months ago, and it was invaluable and really changed how we structured the grant application. And sometimes it's easier to get it right the first time than get funding and then change it. And then last but not least, there is a way to do what we call CPRET, which is really city training for community members. And it is formal IRB training that is project specific for community members in research ethics. So this is how we have partnered with our community partners to look at data with us. We've had community partners that have coded data and looked at de-identified data and sat alongside us to really understand and go through that process. So last but not least, I want to talk about community engaged research in CF. And I think I want to end with how we can do better in CF, but I want to highlight that we already do a lot. But I think that we are really poised to be the standard for how we conduct the highest quality community engaged research. But I want to throw out some ideas, and I hope that this leads to some discussion. But I do wonder about a requirement of foundational or government funding to have not just a plan to engage the community, but a robust plan, an evidence-based plan that looks at this and looks not just at, yeah, we talked to some people, but we engaged with people throughout the process, we paid people, and we continued to look for their feedback and their ideas. I think that it's really important that we partner intentionally with the community and routinely on recruitment of groups underrepresented in research. And I know a lot of ongoing CF work is focused on this group. But I think that some of these principles can really be deeply embedded in more that we do. I think these listening sessions with the community can get more at the core of what we should be studying. and what we should be focusing our time and attention on. I think sometimes it's important to host these by diverse groups. I think that sometimes it feels some sort of way if an academic investigator comes into a room of people with CF and says, well, what do you want? What do you want us to do? Versus when somebody from the community is engaging with their peers. And I think that that can be something that can be done by advocacy organizations like CFRI, CFF, Boomer Esiason, Emily's Entourage. But I think it can be critical to really give people that safe space to understand their priorities and perspectives related to upcoming studies and therapies. And I think that gene therapy is one of the most important things that we need to understand what the community feels about this and how we're going to study it and how we're going to disseminate some of this work. But this is the challenge. What else can we do, and how can we more deeply engage the community in research and in clinical partnerships so we can indeed make it better for everyone? And with that, I want to say thank you to my lab, my partners in the Sharing Research Working Group, the Pride CF study, and most importantly, our community partners and all our research participants. Thank you so much.
So please don't leave. We are now going to have about 30 minutes to have a really in-depth discussion about how do we get to a cure? Because I know that this has been like the goal of really all of us in this whole building is how do we move towards a cure? And I think that what the biggest takeaway from all of our speakers is that we need to keep people with CF, our CF community, at the center of all we do. They need to be involved from the very beginning to the very end at every step of all the processes, because we can see with CFTR modulators as our example, how people with CF and their needs were left out and what happens. So please make your way to the microphones, or for those of us who don't like to speak into a microphone, we are also watching in the app. You can enter in questions for our whole panel of speakers for us to have a really good discussion about how do we move in this next decade, how do we move in the next 30 years to make sure that we can be standing on this stage celebrating our successes and not continuing to repeat the mistakes of what's happened over this last decade. So I wanted to open it up to our parents of children with CF to talk about what are your hopes for not just modulators, but beyond modulators. Whoever wants to speak first.
I had to pause and think. Hope, access. Ability to have insurance that won't say no. Because we have insurance and then the insurance says, I'm sorry, you're not getting that. Because, and it's some kind of arbitrary answer that persists for months or past a year. I would like to see the research continue so that everyone everywhere can get what they need to be healthy and as we approach a cure. So Bijal P. Trivedi's book, Breath from Salt, I highly recommend it. Nobody paid me to say that. But it just tells so much of that history of finding out what CF is, giving it a name, Dr. Dorothy Anderson, and then the entire journey and all these companies that are involved and have been involved in the research for a cure, right? To find something that works. The role of Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, the immense, dedicated, deliberate, ongoing work that they do. But today, 2025, we still don't have one. And today, 2025, we still have people who can't access it, whether they're from England or Argentina or wherever they are in the world. So that's what I'd like to see.
Gail, do you want to know?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the top of the list has got to be access for everybody, and a system that makes that possible. And it doesn't have to be the fight that we're all having, bringing parents across the world to talk about how they get access for their children. And I know that the CF Foundation, obviously, that's something they're focusing on, is the cure. But there's no point having a cure that's going to cost $2 million and only the very smallest proportion of people can get it. We need a cure for everyone, and it's got to be just that for everybody. So I think that's the hope, is a cure for everyone at an affordable cost that everybody can access.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest fear is, all this effort, all of this effort, the thousands of great strides that have happened over the years, all of the research is going to lead to just further exploitation of the CF community through ridiculous prices of treatments. My hope is that there would be greater transparency in all of this, that there be acknowledgement of the mistakes, the limitations, and I wouldn't say mistakes, but the lessons learned from the venture philanthropy that the foundation has done, and how we're going to avoid those limitations in the future, so that we do have an accessible cure when a cure comes. It's time for the foundation to choose. Are we going to, choose between really supporting the foundation or supporting the CF community or offending Vertex? It's time to choose. Because I'll tell you, every time I open the NACFC app and Vertex Pharmaceuticals flashes across the screen, and I am reminded of the continual exploitation of myself. I have 2 daughters with CF that are taking modulators. And the fear that I live in, I am privileged to have access. But when they could be stripped away at any time, and I would either be bankrupt or my daughters would sink back into lack of access, and their health would immediately decline. It's time to choose what we're really going after here. And I acknowledge I maybe have missed it. I've had a very busy year. So if the foundation is doing things and other organizations, I'm happy to hear about it. But the optics are silence. Not enough. Where was the foundation on these slides on the efforts to provide generic access? Where's the foundation support? Oh, I love this foundation. And it can't be we can't say enough how much good the foundation has done. And it can't be said enough how wonderful the drugs that Vertex has produced, right? I have clear memories of putting my arms around the vice president of Vertex Pharmaceuticals, sobbing into his shoulder with my gratitude for the work that the Vertex has done. And we can hold them accountable for the exploitation that these drug prices and the damage that these drug prices have on the CF community. And that is my hope.
So I would like just to put a call or an ask to the CF Foundation and the pharmaceutical companies who have partnered with the CF community to put people with CF first, and to put their needs and their interests and their ideas from the beginning in the basic science studies, to the clinical trials, to the drug development, to the pricing, to the outreach, to the trial outcomes and beyond. To put people with CF first, to put the CF community, and to not just extort the community, but to serve them. So we ask that for ongoing studies, including gene therapy, to put people with CF first, involved from head to toe, beginning to end, their needs, their wants, their desires, because the CF community has the answers and the passion to get this done. So we open it up to questions at the microphone. So.
Thank you all very much, and so much really, really powerful speeches and wisdom from the panel, and so many incredible parents who are doing what they had to do to look after their kids. And I wanted to ask a little bit about some of the strategies that Jonathan mentioned about how we get to universal access to these modulators. And I'm here with Carmen, who's from South Africa, and that's a place where, in theory, Vertex have made an intervention to ensure access to their treatment. But I wanted to ask Carmen just to share a little bit about how that's playing out for her and her family, if that's okay, and then to get the reflections of the panel.
Hello, everybody. The headlines hit the end of last year where Vertex had made Trikafta available in South Africa. And you can imagine, as a mother, and as we all know, the CF community is a close one. So the joy that was shared was incredible. We're approaching a year now, and we still do not have access. We are tired of the misrepresentation, the shows, the tactics, and yes, now is time that something be done. And I agree with you that we need to pick a side now, make a noise, and this needs to stop.
I think you can go ahead and ask your question. Thank you.
My name is Fadias. I'm a pediatric pulmonologist and a CF Center Director in Utah. I'm from Jordan, and when I went to medical school, we're talking about 25 years ago, cystic fibrosis in Jordan was very striking, and it was really very desperate. And in the last 3 years, I started doing work back in Jordan with the CF centers, and it was heartbreaking to see that it's still the same. I am privileged to work in a country here where I can see all the advances we have accomplished in cystic fibrosis and how every year their life expectancy increases even more. In Jordan, as of 2023, they still die at 14 years. It's still a pediatric disease. And when we say we cannot wait any longer, it's those kids who cannot wait. They are dying. Their death is now preventable. They could live longer. I'm not saying that modulators is the cure or is the end of the story, but it will give them more time till we have something else. It will give them more time for the other things to work. So I really do not have a question. I just wanted to thank you for the potential and the promise of having something affordable and accessible for all these kids. Jordan is only one country. It's a small country. But when we think about India, Brazil, Egypt, all these countries, I think there was a presentation at the European conference where we estimate there are more people with cystic fibrosis undiagnosed in these countries than diagnosed people in Western European countries. So I think this is really important when we say until a cure is found and no one is left behind. I think this is it. This is what we're talking about. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Samia Nasser from University of Michigan. And as Father said, I came from Egypt and I've been working here, but going back to Egypt and seeing how poorly they were doing, it's heartbreaking. It's like, you're seeing them and then the next year you're going, where are the kids? They are died already. So it's really, and now that we have Trikafta in Egypt, as a donation program. It's very exciting to see how better they're doing, but at the same time, some of them are so ill already, so it's not going to make too much difference in them. So, but I'm very happy that at least we have it. There are shortages of enzymes, there are shortages of, vitamins in there, but at the same time, I think I'm an optimist. So I think it's exciting to live through the journey in Egypt of diagnosing them, which they didn't really, they weren't diagnosed before. And then now that we are hoping that they are doing better, and I'm hoping for the next chapter in our life there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Terry Laguna, pediatric pulmonologist from the University of Washington. I want to thank all of the parents for telling their stories and for being as vulnerable and transparent and honest as you are. I think sometimes the tendency when we hear stories like that may make us uncomfortable, or a call out to the foundation that may make leadership uncomfortable, the tendency is to just get defensive and say, well, look at all that we are doing. Look at all that we have already done. Look at this, look at that, and not really listen to what the ask is. And I mean, I've heard from all of you acknowledging all of the transformative changes, the amazing things that the foundation has done, the amazing things this community has done, and there are still gaps that need to be filled, and we need the foundation's help in order to do that. And we need the help of every single person in this room in order to do that. So my hope, I know you guys mentioned some hope up there. My hope is that the foundation is open to conversations about what else they can do, recognizing that they have done amazing things and there still is work to be done. And engaging the community, Tracy, like you talked about, that's where we're going to get the next steps. Listening to what the community has to say, where those gaps are, partnering, and then listening and doing something. Because again, I think sometimes you engage with these communities, you get them to open up, be vulnerable, and then you do nothing with the information, which just erodes whatever trust you have built with those marginalized populations. And we can't keep doing that. So I applaud your honesty, your vulnerability, and I hope that we can respond to that call as a foundation in the community.
I'd like to respond to that. Thank you. It's my hope as well. Personally, I want to acknowledge the willingness of the foundation to have met with me a number of times. I want to make that clear, that when I have asked for conversations, they have had them with me and they have heard me. And I am very grateful for that and for the efforts that they have taken to listen to me specifically, even as little as I know. And so I do want to say, I know personally that the foundation is listening. And I know it's a very difficult landscape, right? Like the complexities are many, right? The funding, the playing ball with corporate entities, all of it. It's the insurance industry, the governmental landscape, in the United States that we live in today, and I can't think of anything but swear words, so I'll just skip that. But the point is, yes, it's complex. And this is what the foundation and the CF community was founded on, was doing hard things. When Frank Griffiths and all the folks that in the early days of cystic fibrosis and the research that was done, the impossible tasks that were completed to even get us to where we are today. This foundation and this CF community and everything is built on doing hard things. So let's just keep that spirit alive and let's continue to do the hard things together.
Oh.
Oh. There you go.
Okay, I'm Grace Paul. I work in Nationwide Children's in Columbus, and my work has been on CF in India, and I've been blessed with the opportunity to do this work there. And I work predominantly with centers in South India. So in the past few years, there's been a lot more progress happening. There's a lot more momentum that's going on. Many physicians and CF interest doctors have collaborated. And recently, the Indian Council of Medical Research has also showed some interest. So even though we believe that the numbers and the progress is bleak and very slow, there's some action going on, and this is the time to actually spread the knowledge about how much CF prevalence is. So we think it could be even up to like 100,000 patients or something like that in India. From a logistical standpoint, working with India is difficult. So those who know the country will understand it's a lot of red tape, a lot of clearances. But this is a slow work. It's a marathon, and I strongly appreciate my unit, the CF Foundation, everybody for helping us as a joint community. The foundation right now has helped us establish some CF centers. We are going to get more diagnostic equipment set up in different places, and also we're going to try to initiate a newborn screening process there. So I do appreciate the CF Foundation's investment right now into our work, and for trusting me and my colleagues to start and continue this work. So thank you for all the parents who inspire us. Last week I was in India. I saw a toddler who was dying and had mutations which are not eligible, and I couldn't say anything to the parents. It was such a hard moment when I had to just walk away without giving hope, and I do not want that to continue. But that was also inspiring me to continue the work that we're doing now.
As we wait for the next question from the mic, I actually have a question for you, Gail. With a generic version of Trikafta coming out soon, is there a plan of how it will be disseminated, particularly to countries who have a poor public health infrastructure and limited resources?
Yes, today really marks the beginning of this journey. We've been speaking to the generic manufacturer for a couple of years now, so it's taken this long to get to the point where the production. So that is going to be the next stages, is going to be how we get it out to people. Initially, we wanted to make it public so that people can take advantage. There are personal importation laws in countries, so we're asking patients to check where they live, what the personal importation laws are, and they can actually just import for themselves, which is a common thing. So that's what we're going to start with. But after that, we're going to be looking at how we can, get governments involved, to obviously buy bigger bulk and other organisations that can help to spread it. So we're at the beginning of the journey, but we are definitely looking ahead at how we can get it out there to as many patients as possible, as quickly as possible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hello, I'm İlknur Görgün from Turkey. I'm the mother of a CF daughter who is now 24 years old. I want to thank to my friends. You are doing great job. We have been struggling for the modulators in Turkey for about 4 years. In 2021, we have started to sue our social security institution to access, and we got the right to take these drugs since then. And now, in 2025, at last, we have access, because it was a hard way for us, because we sued our social security institution. We did this as an advocacy because it was not a proper way to have access to a drug. And now, as a mother and the patient representative, I'm the president of Patient Association, I cannot stop myself thinking and worrying about future. Because we talk about the exact cure, But now I cannot stop thinking who will get that exact cure when it comes. It's difficult. Thank you.
And I just want to share a comment from our online questions. If we can generate a path forward to prevent the incredibly high drug costs from Vertex, we will demonstrate how the patients and families battling diabetes, cancer, and other life-threatening diseases also facing high costs can change their outcomes. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cameron Jordan, a pediatric pulmonologist at University of New Mexico. To the family, friends, and people with CF, thank you for sharing your story and for inviting us to be a part of your lived experience. I know saying thank you can't fully compound what your experience is, but I truly appreciate you at least letting us have a bit of insight into your experience as well. And I say that as my brother-in-law is a person with CF, and seeing how ETI has changed his health, where we're not getting regular texts saying that he's in the hospital and looking at getting pleurodesis. It's been incredible. I have a comment and a question. To our CF care teams and providers, we have work to do. This room should be packed like it was a plenary. If we are all here saying, yes, we're here for a cure, we're here for equity, this room, there shouldn't be an empty seat. So that's just my comment. As a assistant professor, I'm very new to the faculty life of things. So my question to more seasoned researchers and professors is, how can we leverage our skills and assets to ensure that our equitable research doesn't come with an asterisk once a cure is achieved?
Wow. So I have a request from Michelle that you repeat that question. And as you repeat it, I'll sit here and ponder a little bit more.
It's powerful.
The question is for the people that have more research experience, because I'm new to the research life. How can we leverage our skills and assets that we have worked so hard to achieve to ensure a cure is achieved without the asterisk being that the cure is for some?
So it is doing what you're doing right now and using your voice. So I will say that when I started my work in advocacy leading to research here at the CF conference, there was no space for me because there was no equity research. There was no discussion about differences by race, ethnicity, gender, income at all. And I think it is that persistent stubbornness and focus on the advocacy piece. And for me, that has always been driven by people with CF, their caretakers, and their stories. And I think if we continue to lift up those voices and create the opportunities like we are today to show them, that keeps our minds, our hearts, our passion linked to that, and that will continue to drive it. But it will take a lot of braveness to continue to speak out and not say the comfortable things, but to continue to be like, well, that's great that we're celebrating whatever findings up on the plenary stage, but that's not the answer. And I think it will continue to be more and more of us to do that, to really make sure that we are really achieving a cure for all.
And I think one of the things that as we sit here in a developed first world country, bringing attention to the fact that not everyone has access to this medication is really supreme, because I think that many people who are attending this conference are oblivious to that fact. So making awareness, making sure that we tell the full story of CF and how it is, the treatment is often for the people who are advantaged, and I use that in quotation marks. So continuing to tell that story, I think, is extremely important, and continuing to partner with families to help us tell that story.
I'm sort of piggybacking on what multiple people have said. When my boys were first diagnosed, one of them was really angry that it took so long to get a diagnosis, angry with how the diagnosis was presented to him as a teenager who could understand this, angry that he was approaching official adulthood, but having adulthoodness, if that could be a term, taken away from him. And I always remember that because when I tried dealing with my own grief to comfort him, he said, "No, don't tell me that. You don't know, Mom. When the first diagnosis came, I did my research and I saw how much this was driven, looking for a cure was driven by capitalism. How much it took to even recruit people to work on this. And then as medicines became available, how much it costs. So he kept telling me, no, don't tell me it's going to be okay. And it hasn't been okay for them. Now, I've also heard David, my goodness, now I want to change your name to Daniel, but I've heard David speak, and I've heard him speak before, and I hear what he's saying too, because it's echoing what one son said. Maybe I was just born really, really optimistic and really driven to believe in the power of humanity, in the ability for all of us, regardless of background, knowledge, ability, etc., to come together to work on what is impossible, to echo what was just said. Since my boys got diagnosed, or when they got diagnosed, I'd never heard of it. And then I realized as a teacher, one of my students the year before had cystic fibrosis. And I remember my own perceptions about the student. When he wasn't doing well, when he was absent all the time, like what was really going on with him. And I never like to judge or call someone lazy, but I remember even hearing colleagues say, oh, he's just lazy, doesn't want to do anything. But it wasn't that. He was struggling to breathe. He was struggling to get nourishment. And I didn't understand that. And I had to go to his parents. I had to find them, and I wept. And I said, I am so sorry that I did not understand the ramifications of this. However, since the boys were diagnosed, I've tried to be involved with the CF Foundation. And initially, it was really difficult because my heart was just breaking and I was weeping too much. Over the years, it's gotten a little bit better. And what I've found is, even though the difficulties prevail, even though the disparities prevail, I've seen the work of the CF Foundation in terms of just openness, in terms of changing the language in the brochures, in the pamphlet, looking at the CF Foundation and seeing people who look like my boys, right? Who got late diagnoses or who got earlier diagnoses. I rejoice when somebody's diagnosed at 3 months and even 3 years, because that's before my boys. And it's better to know than not know, so at least you know earlier what you're facing, and maybe you have a little more hope that you can access things. I also remember the first time going into a doctor's office and opening up a pamphlet and seeing children of color. And not just children of color here in the United States, but children of color elsewhere in the world. And I think that as much as we have a lot of work to do, we have made some progress, because we have to equalize the language first. We have to equalize humanity first. We have to then say, okay, whatever it is that we do, we're doing it for every single person, not just the privileged few who can afford it.
Okay. I've taken in a lot of things here, and I do want to make a couple comments. One is that I think what I'm hearing from people here is the same thing I go to sleep with and wake up with every morning. On either side of this issue, whether you've had access to the modulators and every lovely thing out there or not, we don't sleep. We don't rest. If most of us, if we feel this sense of community that I'm feeling here, and I mean global community, and I mean differences communities. And I'm hearing that, and it's energizing me even more. And I think that brings me to another point, which is that we got to take care of ourselves. I'm just going to throw that in here because you got these people up here and everybody here. And I know myself. I mean, we're plowing along. We're racing a clock. We're racing the evil witch's overturned hourglass when we get a CF diagnosis. We're racing, racing, racing. And then we get something that happens. And in this most recent years, it's been the modulators. And that was huge. But then we're still racing and racing and racing against all the things you've talked about here, the insurance issues and so forth. So I just urge everybody to keep that sense of community and hold it in your heart, because that's going to it's going to keep us driving. But another thing that's going to keep us driving is not being afraid of our anger. And I'm pissed. And I hear that in a lot of people. I'm so pissed. And I'm glad, David, you said, mentioned, the uncomfortable feeling of saying, I love this company that made this, but it wasn't just them who made it. And I'm so discouraged and I'm so angry at them too. I think a lot of us feel that, and it's okay to be that angry. As a matter of fact, what's wrong with you if you're not? Because if we go back to that other point, we are a community if we truly think of everybody else drowning in this thing called CF, and only some get thrown a life vest because they can come up with a wallet in the middle of the ocean and hand it. That's how absurd it is. So we have to remember to be the sense of absurdity of it and hold on to that anger too, and come back to the hope of the community that we can get it done. And finally, I would say there are some tangible things I think the CF Foundation can do. And I hope they can, and I hope they will. But the first one, the biggest one that comes to mind, though, somebody else have the mic, is that Vertex has proven that out of control side of capitalism, you can, it's my husband puts it this way and says, we've all worked for this cure thing or breakthrough. And then, so we've all built a car together. And why do we hand the keys to the car to these guys and say, okay, go have fun? You know what I mean? So that's where we're at. And what CF Foundation, I think, can do is say, okay, kumbaya is over. You're playing hardball. We play hardball. There are other biotechs. Whenever they talk to one, there are other ones in the queue that would like to be working with us. It's a big, successful foundation. I say this with all love in my heart for all the things the foundation has directed and helped us get done over the years, but we've been there too. We are the foundation. So if it's me sitting in that chair negotiating, I'm going to play hardball and say, you show us certain benchmarks of access globally, because this is a community, and then you can have more and more rights. I know our patent laws don't work that way. I'm not naive. So that takes efforts on the policy end too, but we can't move like a turtle. So I would say the foundation has some power here, negotiating power, and I may be wrong, but I think that's true. And I think they need to play hardball. So thank you guys for all you do. You're beautiful and I love you.
I'll be brief and quick. And Cameron, thank you for your question. And all the speakers are sharing their stories. And I think the storytelling is important and essential. And we need to keep building community. And I think the point is that this takes time. All of you have been on the stage before for the last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And we've built up this momentum as a community to think through these issues. We have the ideas, but we can't be naive that the people in power today, especially in our country, and you mentioned this, they don't listen unless we get more people involved. And maybe then they won't listen. But there are people in power that have connections to CF in DC that don't care and are cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, cutting health insurance benefits. They have family members with CF. There are other people that support the CFF and others that vote the wrong way, and I'm sorry, I'll say that here. And I think we as a community can work together to continue to build this process and tell these stories over time.
I hope that you are all inspired. I hope you all feel more passionate about this. I hope you all feel a little bit more angry and moved by all the stories from here. And I really want to thank all of our CF community that is here, our speakers, our parent partners, for I'm able to say that our parents of children with CF do so much, and then these families, some have traveled around the world, have taken so much time to come here on top of everything else they do. So just another round of applause for our wonderful CF families. And thank you for coming today.